In this segment, we're going to illustrate how to install the Bair Super Hub bolt-on wheel kit for the Caterpillar 247, 257, and the ASV Terex 30, 50, 60, and 70 machines. This kit upgrades both older and newer undercarriages to a greasable steel hub with alloy wheels and a 100% larger axle shaft for additional strength and longevity. Each kit comes complete with all new components needed to replace one pair of wheels and installation instructions to do a professional installation. Here we have a mainframe off of a Caterpillar 247, 257. The frame doesn't have to be off the machine to install the hubs. We've removed it for visual clarity in this program. To install the Super Hub kit, we first need to cut off the existing factory axle. We will leave about 3/4 of an inch of the stub from the mainframe. The stub is maintained so it can be used as a guide, as you will see in a moment. You can use a saw or cutting torch to remove the existing axle, whichever you prefer. This process is repeated on both sides of the mainframe, leaving the same stub length. Next, we take a grinder and remove any excess sludge or metal on the stub so the bore guide will slide on smoothly and evenly. This process also happens on both sides of the mainframe. In your kit, you will find 2 bore guides which are made of plastic. If you use a torch after grinding, let the stub cool down before putting on the guide. Bair supplies 2 guides in each kit just in case you need a spare. We use the bore guide to start the process and maintain an oil bath to keep the surfaces slick and cool. Once we have the boring groove started, we remove the guide to complete the boring process. Bair supplies a hole saw and arbor attachment to achieve the proper depth to penetrate the frame over the stub. Once the boring through of the first side of the frame is complete, the same process is repeated on the other side of the frame. Remember to grind off any excess metal off the stub so the bore guide slides smoothly and evenly. As you can see, the 2 bore holes through the mainframe are perfectly aligned. We suggest that the mainframe be clean of any debris before installing the new Super Hub axle. To illustrate the difference between the factory axle and the Bair Super Hub axle, here is a comparison of the two. On the left, you can see the axle we just cut out of the mainframe. Next to it is a new factory axle, and next to it on the right is the Bair Super Hub axle. As you can see, the Bair axle and bearing are significantly larger and stronger than the original equipment. Here, we're pointing out the alignment grooves we put on both sides of the Super Hub axle. When the axle is inserted through the frame, these grooves will just barely show on each side of the box tube mainframe. In most cases, the Bair Super Hub axle will align perfectly inside the frame. On this particular frame, there is an issue caused by a previous owner. They made the mistake of cutting out the old broken axle, leaving an untrue hole. We realized this after we bored our hole and discovered that the axle was out of square. The leading and trailing axles must be square or you're going to have wheel and track issues. Upon measuring from the center lines of these 2 axles on both sides, we found that the axle is about 1/8 to 3/16 out of true. To fix this situation, we take the axle back out and remove enough material on the opposing side to get the axle to square up. We recommend that the axles be tack welded on both sides of the frame before proceeding to complete the welding process. 1 complete pass around the axle is sufficient. The bearings that come in the kit will need to be packed with grease. Bair Products recommends this process of packing. The grease must be forced into the bearing between the case and the bearing and all around the bearing. You will see the grease coming out between the inner and outer frame of the bearing. If you have a cone bearing packer, that's great. If not, this is the recommended way to pack bearings. After the bearing is packed, go ahead and put the grease around the exterior of the bearing before installation. You'll want to drop the grease-packed bearing squarely into the bore of the hub. You'll need to keep the area where the seal will be installed free of grease, as you will be using a liquid locking material to lock in the seal to get a good bond when it all goes together. With the bearing in the hub, we're ready to install the seal. Bair supplies enough locking material for both hub seals. When you install the seal, the metal ring needs to be facing outboard on the hub.
Gently drive the seal down 1/16 of an inch below the retainer ring groove. Next, install the seal's retainer ring.
Wipe off any excess grease from the exterior of the hub. After the seals are set, put a little grease on your finger and pre-lube the seal. Next, place the steel protective seal ring on top of the installed seal. Take the seal protector cap and place it over the hub, tapping lightly to secure the fit on the hub. This will help to eliminate debris from the seal area. Now, you're ready to install the hub onto the axle. Install the hub and tap snugly into place.
When installing the 14-inch front idler wheels, you will need to protect the grease fittings. Included in your kit are 2 steel-threaded screws. Screw the guides into the hub about a 1/4 inch, then proceed with the hub installation. Remove both guides from the hub before you bolt on the front idler wheel. This will not be used for the 10-inch wheel kits.
Next, we install the outer bearing anti-spin washer and castle nut. You have to run the nut into around 50 foot-pounds to make sure the seal is positioned all the way down. Then back it off to 0. Now tighten the nut with your fingers. Then rotate the nut tighter to the next slot in the castle nut, about 1/8 of a turn. Now you have the proper Carter key alignment and bearing preload. Do not over-preload the bearings. Install the Carter key and lock it in. Install the dust cap and lock ring, then bolt on your wheel. If you installed the front idler wheel, remember to remove the 2 alignment guides that protected the grease fitting and keep them for future use.
2 steel pilot flanges are included with the 10-inch wheel kit. Place the flange on the outside of the wheel, and the bolts will pass through the flange into the wheel. This will add strength and support between the hub and the wheel.